You are doing a great job. You really are.
I'm trying.
I saw you the other day. I was watching. You were great. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. We're here to talk about the Tappan Zee Bridge this morning. We'll hear from Brandon Saul, who's the chairman of the Tappan Zee Bridge Selection Committee, from Brian Conybeare, who's a new member of the team, a special advisor to me for the Tappan Zee Bridge, who's been doing really extraordinary work. And I live in Westchester, so I've been able to watch his work up close and personal, and he's been doing a really great job. And Howard Glazer, Director of State Operations, who you'll hear from in a moment. The Tappan Zee is a bridge, as you know, but in many ways it's become a symbol for me of what we're trying to do here in so many ways and what we've been talking about on so many levels. Tappan Zee Bridge had become a symbol of dysfunction and lack of competence by government. We talked about replacing the Tappan Zee Bridge, must have been close to a decade, dozens and dozens of meetings, tens of millions of dollars spent and no progress. It's a sign in many ways of the societal complexity and how hard it is to do a big project nowadays, how hard it is to make a decision on a complex, controversial project. Any project of this size is going to have a level of controversy. And it's hard to go through the process and make a decision and execute the decision. So, yes, it's a bridge, but it's a symbol of what we're trying to do, to get the government running, to get the government as an agent of change, to get the government competent and functioning, and to get big things done in the state of New York again. And that's exactly what replacing this bridge will be. It will be a big sign of progress, a big act of progress for the state. With that, I'll turn it over to Howard Glazer, Director of State Operations, to tell us the latest.
Thank you very much, Governor. And let me just start with a status report on where we are. First, obviously, the need for the bridge the Governor just talked about. Overcrowded, unsafe bridge, 2 times the accident rate on this bridge than any other mile on the New York State Thruway. No mass transit availability or capability, no emergency breakdown lanes. You can see the picture tells the story, the frustration, the cost to people in terms of time, the air and noise, pollution. Everyone agrees the bridge needs to be built and replaced. As the Governor said, 13 years of dysfunction. A year ago, the Governor said we're going to move expeditiously but with community support to begin a process to replace the bridge and end that dysfunction. He asked President Obama for a special designation of the Tappan Zee Bridge replacement as one of about a dozen critical infrastructure projects named by the President to receive additional federal approvals and cooperation with the federal government. We signed in the end of the year last year design-build legislation, which cuts through the red tape, streamlines the process, cuts months, if not years, off of the actual construction process itself. And then since the beginning of the year, we've issued both a draft environmental impact statement, a process that's involved numerous community meetings. Brian and Larry Schwartz and others that are here have attended, I think, dozens, if not 100, community meetings to talk about the environmental impact process. That draft environmental impact statement was issued just this August, and we're awaiting now, and I feel very confident that we'll receive soon, final word from the federal government, and I'm hopeful that we'll be among the first, if not the first, of the presidentially designated projects to receive formal approval from the federal government. Most recently, the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council approved the overall project. That's what enables the federal government to move ahead with the final EIS approval. That brings us up to today. The most important part in many ways of the process at this point is the selection of the design of the bridge itself. Back in July, we received 3 bids. Those 3 bids comprise over 750,000 pages of the best ideas from international builders and architects who are bidding on the project. Over the previous few weeks, those bids have been undergoing a very detailed technical review. That review is nearing completion, and now we're turning the process over to the formal selection committee to make its evaluations and judgments. And with that, let me turn it over to Brian Conybeare to describe the selection process and today's news.
All right, will do. Thank you, Howard. There's no question that the Hudson River is one of New York's treasured natural assets. Everybody can agree with that, and that's why we are announcing the formation of a different kind of selection committee today. Back in August, Governor Cuomo sent a letter to the New York State Thruway Authority requesting this different kind of panel that combines technical expertise with other outside perspectives, including world-renowned architects and artists, local community representatives from Westchester and Rockland counties and Hudson River villages right near the bridge. Local history and cultural representatives are represented as well, environmental experts and international design experts, all part of this new kind of selection committee we are naming. And this selection committee has a major task at hand. They will evaluate the best value of the 3 design bids that we have. You saw those boxes, 750,000 pages, but they are looking for the best value for New York State. The selection committee will use the best value approach that was made possible by the design build legislation Howard mentioned that was enacted by the governor and the state legislature last year. It looks at factors such as the design and the long-term quality of the project to ensure that the proposal that gets chosen in the end meets the needs of the region, the transportation, and the toll payers for years and years to come. This bridge should last a minimum of 100 years before it needs any major structural repairs. It should last 150 to 200 years in the end. So the selection committee will take into consideration all aspects of the bids, including these criteria here. The Thruway Authority and the governor are determined to make sure the new bridge complements the beauty of the Hudson Valley region. We are honored to have some very highly qualified, internationally known volunteers joining our team to help us do that today. The bridge design review team includes Jeffrey Coons. Mr. Coons is an internationally recognized artist, widely known for his iconic sculptures. His work has been exhibited extensively around the world. Back in 2005, he was elected as a fellow to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Mr. Coons is based in New York City. Also joining the team today, Richard Meyer. Mr. Meyer is an architect who received his training at Cornell University right here in New York and established his own office in New York City back in 1963. Since that time, his international practice has encompassed major cultural and civic commissions, as well as private residences, corporate and academic facilities. He's received the highest honors in the architecture field, including the Pritzker Prize for Architecture, the gold medals of the American Institute of Architects, and the Royal Institute of British Architects, among other honors. Also joining the team today, Thomas P. Campbell, director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Since becoming the 9th director at the Met in 2009, Mr. Campbell has pursued an agenda that focuses on scholarship and accessibility, the priorities that are maintaining the museum's excellence in its exhibitions, publications, acquisitions, and permanent collections, while encouraging some new thinking about the visitor experience at the Met. Prior to his appointment, Campbell was a curator at the Metropolitan's Department of European Sculpture and Decorative Arts for 14 years. Now, those 3 big names will be joined by 3 other distinguished members of this new panel, including Keith Brownlee, an internationally known bridge architect. He has specialized in the design of major infrastructure projects around the world. He has been responsible for shaping numerous landmark bridge structures in the United Kingdom, Greece, China, and other countries as well. Also joining the team today, Thomas Wormuth. He is the director of the Hudson River Valley Institute and vice president of academic affairs and the dean of faculty at Marist College in Poughkeepsie on the banks of the Hudson. Mr. Wormuth is an expert on the social and economic history of the Hudson Valley. He's also the editor of the book series, The Hudson River Valley, An American Region, focusing on the history, culture, literature, and tourism of the area. He's also an associate editor of the Encyclopedia of New York. To say he knows the Hudson River is an understatement. Also joining the team is Alison Spear. She is a local and LEED certified architect, is presently a senior designer with Ennead Architects in New York City. She has received several awards, including the Design Star Award from the Design Center of the Americas, and was named the 2005 Interior Architect of the Year by the American Institute of Architects. She is also the co-chair of the DIA Beacon Council in Beacon, New York, another local institution right on the banks of the Hudson River. The selection committee also includes nearly a dozen people with a wide range of expertise, including 2 members who were selected by the Westchester and Rockland County executives, Rob Astorino and Scott Vanderhoff, and 2 more named by the mayor of Tarrytown, Drew Fixell, and the mayor of South Nyack, Tish DeBow. There are also several technical experts and state transportation representatives with backgrounds in mass transit, road planning, engineering, and large-scale construction project. And there is also a team of assistants, technical advisors, more than 24 of them, to help the selection committee sort through all the technical details that they have to take into consideration in the process. So the process is moving forward, and the next steps coming up in the coming weeks, we will make a public presentation of the 3 bids so people can get a look at the design proposals as they stand before a final selection is made. Members of the selection committee will get a first-hand look at the current Tappan Zee Bridge and its location. That will happen shortly. Once the selection committee makes its selection, that recommendation will go to the Thruway Authority Board, which will have to vote on approving the final bid. Now, it's a little complicated, but the selection committee kind of has 3 options before reaching their final recommendation. They can recommend an award to one of the 3 bids submitted in July. Simply, this is the best one, we think. It can authorize negotiations with one or more of the bid teams based on their submission, or they can authorize a request for what's known as a best and final offer from multiple bidders. Once that process is played out, the committee will make its recommendation to the Thruway Board, who has to vote on it. Now, we hope to complete the selection process and get the winning contractors to work by the end of this year, and that will certainly be a big day when that does happen. So that is the update on where we are headed now that we are naming the selection committee. Right now, I'd like to introduce the chairman of the new New York Bridge Selection Committee, Brandon Saul. Mr. Saul is a member of the Thruway Authority Board of Directors and attorney with a practice based in White Plains who calls Westchester County home. Mr. Saul.
Thank you, Brian. The governor has recognized the importance of this Tappan Zee Bridge project. In August, he sent a letter to the Thruway Authority and asked for a new kind of selection committee, which was just outlined. It consists of national experts in architecture and art, as well as members of the local community. We believe we've put together such a distinguished panel that we're going to be able to get a high-quality bridge with a great design. And will balance all the many goals that we have for this new bridge. We want to obviously complement the natural landscape and river system that the bridge will span, and will include the best new options available for commuters, pedestrians, bikers, all while ensuring that toll payers are given the best possible deal. Working together, we're committed to selecting a final bid that truly represents best value, which will give New Yorkers the best bridge possible at an affordable price for all commuters. Now it's my honor to introduce again Governor Cuomo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for taking on this added responsibility, and thank you for your service on the Thruway Authority. As I mentioned before, Brian Conybeare. I hear Brian speak. Brian used to be on News 12, which is a news station that I would listen to at home, and I hear him speak, and I feel like I'm back in my den at home, just lulled into a full sense of security because I'm not in my den at home. But Brian's been doing an extraordinary job, and the whole team is, and I want to thank them very much. We've had really great progress over these past few months. You know, the design-build legislation was key, and not just for this project, but for projects going forward. It's going to change fundamentally the way this state builds and contracts, and it's I believe, people don't yet appreciate the benefit and the significance of that change. The federal fast-tracking of this project was a big, big win for the state. You know, this normal approval process on a bridge like this could be years and years, and no one has ever heard of this abbreviated, expedited, facilitated, and approval process. So that was very big. The community outreach process that this team undertook, Howard spoke about it. They were everywhere, talking to everyone, communicating, transparent, talking to people about what it would be. People who had vested interests, people who had concerns, who lived in neighboring areas. That was done extraordinarily well. And the uniformity and unity of the political support. You have local officials, both sides of the river, both sides of the political aisle, who have come together to support this project. So a lot of great, great work. Big hurdles lie ahead, no doubt. The federal government has to accept or not the environmental impact statement. That's going to be a very big decision that is upcoming. We have applied for a federal loan, which is important, and that the federal government is considering that. And then we have to get through the selection process to make sure the project is actually financially feasible. This is a very different type of selection process. It is a multifaceted selection process, as you heard Brian explain, because this is a multifaceted decision. It's a technical decision. You're procuring a bridge. The technical expertise, engineering expertise, material expertise is very important. The cost is important. Also, the design is important. This is in a magnificent location on the globe, literally. This is one of the really beautiful places on this planet. And this bridge is going to be there for a long, long time, 100 years, 150 years, you know, and that it enhances the region from a design point of view is also a very important perspective. So I applaud the team for including people who bring that sensitivity and expertise to the process. Great work. Great progress, all arrows are pointed in the right direction. More to do, but so far so good. Any questions for myself or the team? Betty?
Governor, how much have we asked the federal government to lend us for this project?
I want to say $2.5 billion?
We've asked them for the maximum amount that they can give under the law. It will depend in part on what the final cost of the bridge is, so it's kind of a sliding scale. So could be as much as $2.9 billion. It could be less than that, depending on what the bridge cost comes in at.
Short answer is as much as we can get, Betty, is what we're asking for. That's my job.
You saw $2 billion in the initial loan application, and now it's up to 2.9. I mean, is there a feeling that there's going to be more available, or that your loan application is going to be able to get some more money?
Yeah. Howard?
The original law, when we put in the application last year, only allowed for 33% of bridge costs to be covered. You could only ask for 33%. We asked for 33%. Congress, in the reauthorization this year, upped that percentage to 49%, so we asked for 49%. Now, the Department of Transportation has indicated to all of the applicants or potential applicants at this stage that they will only approve up to 33%, regardless of the congressional amount, that they want to stay below that amount of 33% so they can spread the money out around the country. But we're making a very strong case to get as much money as we possibly can through this process. But right now, that's the reason for the difference.
Governor, is there anything new to report on what the state share in all this is going to be? I know there's been talk about tolls, possibly using some pension funds to pay for it.
You know, no, Nick, you have a number of variables that are still on the table. Number one, how much does the bridge cost? You know, we don't really have that number yet. We have a range, but the range is very large. So how much does the bridge cost? Then how much do we get from the federal government? And then you can start to have, then you have financing options on the remainder. So short answer is no, and there are a number of variables. We're going to work very hard over time to get the toll as low as possible. Obviously, we understand the consequences of the tolls on the bridge. So, but we have no new information on that. As the time goes on, once you know the price of the bridge, once you know what the federal loan is going to be, then I think you'll have some real hard facts to deal with.
Governor, could you explain what the reasoning was to not have specific representatives on the panel that were from environmental groups or from ratepayers or taxpayers?
We have community representatives on both sides. We have people who bring environmental concerns on the committee. And I think, look, this is a very broad-reaching process and committee. I don't know that you've ever had this broad a committee assembled before for this kind of project. If anything, the fear was, Mike, that we were making it too broad and there were too many people involved. And normally this was just done basically by government professionals themselves. So this whole selection process of bringing people from the outside is novel. I'm comfortable with it, but if anything, this is an inclusion, a much more inclusive process with many more people and a broader array of interests and expertise.
So you're convinced the environmental and ratepayer and taxpayer concerns will all be represented?
Yes, yes.
By bringing in the artists, I guess, to advise you on the design, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a really dramatic bridge? Is there a bridge in particular that you think is maybe a model for what the new Tappan Zee should look like?
I think we'll know it when we see it, We want an attractive design that enhances the region. And bringing that perspective to the table is important. I'm not going to comment on the look of the current bridge and what they were thinking when they did that bridge. But I think design is an important element here. As I said before, this is a magnificent part of the Hudson River. It's one of the widest parts, if not the widest part. You're coming into the Haverstraw Bay when you're going north. I've had the opportunity to go up and down the Hudson several times, and it's magnificent all the way along. But this is a really special, provocative point. So we want a design that enhances the best it can the attractiveness of the region.
Governor, I'm sure citizens can understand that you can't answer specifically how much it's going to cost to cross the new bridge when it's built until you know what the design is and the costs are. But on the other hand, people know what they're paying now, and some of the numbers that have been floated, $14, $17 to cross, are rather startling to them. Do you have a gut feeling about what's a reasonable cost for a toll?
I don't want to do a gut feeling on numbers. These are going to be numbers. And when we have definition with some of the costs determined, then we can tell you what the numbers are. I understand the tolls are high. They're high on a lot of bridges. They're high on a lot of roads. It's a function of the economy. I can understand why commuters complain. But on the specific toll, as soon as we have more information, then we'll have a number.
Is this having an impact on the upstate throughway tolls, and do you think there will be a 45% increase?
They're different. It's not. They're different.
The Thruway Authority is going
No, they are different.
Let's follow on that. The Thruway Authority is scheduled to meet this month to consider 45% toll increase. I mean, what's your understanding of where that process is? Are they reconsidering the toll increase there?
I haven't heard any update. They've had a number of hearings. They've been discussing it. They're looking at options, but I haven't gotten any update from them. Unless, Howard, you've heard anything new? No.
Any thoughts on changing the name?
Of the bridge? We haven't talked about that. By the way, it's the Malcolm Wilson Bridge is the name of the bridge. It's often referred to, by myself also, as the Tappan Zee Bridge. The name of the bridge is the Malcolm Wilson Bridge. All right. Little known fact.
Governor, on another topic, what's your reaction to the McDonald and Salam primaries, and what do you think those margins show about how people look at San Francisco?
Tom, I am not a political expert on the Republican Party or the Republican Party dynamics. You had three people who were running, Senator Grisanti, Saland, and Senator McDonald. Senator Grisanti was successful, so it doesn't appear to be evidence of that the vote hurt him. I believe in Senator Saland's case there is evidence that the vote did hurt him in the election. Senator McDonald also. I think it's unfortunate. I know for a fact all three of the gentlemen understood this possibility. We discussed it openly. At the time they were voting, I said one of the reasons I thought it was an act of courage at the time was they were aware of this very real possibility, and they were right. You know, their expectations came true, and they voted for it anyway. And I think we should pause on that point for a second, because that is really an act of political courage, and I think that should be applauded. You know, I don't believe we elect officials to always agree with us. We elect officials to use their best judgment and to be people of character and integrity. And I think this vote, which was a difficult vote, showed character and integrity. I hope it works out for both gentlemen. They're in the middle of recounts now, and I hope it works out. I hope they get reelected.
Does it concern you at all, however, that if one or both of them goes down, you could be dealing with a more conservative state Senate?
You know, who wins the Senate, I think, is a different equation, and we'll know that after the election, and there'll be a lot of theories before. If Senator Saland were to lose or Senator McDonald were to lose, and I'm sure there are a number of factors involved in both races, but it would be disappointing for me. You know, this is a vote that I urged they support and they take. They did, and again, although we discussed it at length that they could lose their seats on this vote, they both went ahead, but it would be sad for me.
Would you consider endorsing them?
Let's see how it goes, but I'm considering a range of options when it comes to endorsements on both sides of the aisle. So we'll see how that goes.
Do you think you could have done, in hindsight, anything more to help them in their primary races?
I don't think politically. Well, look, if you're voting against them because of marriage equality, my support is not going to help. And you could argue that my support may have actually been a negative in that context, because if it was about marriage equality, I would have been a great reminder of the marriage equality vote, and I would have gone out of my way to speak about the marriage equality vote, frankly. So I don't think I could have been, I don't think politically I would have been helpful in these particular situations.
Governor, on the subject of campaigns, I was wondering what you thought of Governor Romney's remarks about 47% of the American public is overly dependent, I guess you would say, on government programs and benefits, and that the government's gone too far in that direction.
Yeah, I think it was indicative of his philosophy, which is different than my philosophy. I think people, from time to time, many people, require government assistance. And I think the basic concept is you provide someone with government assistance, they improve their lives and the life of their family, and that improves the community, and that is the concept. So I don't see the fact that someone would need Medicare assistance or housing assistance or government assistance to feed their children or get their children health care. I don't see that as a negative.
Governor, is there any update on a reconfiguration of the new NYRA or the appointing of the new NYRA board?
We are working on that diligently, and we'll have something soon.
Tony Abella today came out and called on the speaker to resign as speaker. He's the first Democrat in the legislature to do so. Have you seen anything over the last couple of weeks?
See in the Senate or the Assembly? Is he in the Senate or the Assembly?
I think you know the answer to that.
I'm just asking just to make sure I'm right.
Have you seen anything over the last week or two to change your mind on whether the speaker should remain?
I don't know what Mr. Avella said, and I don't know what he said, and I have no comment on what he says. No. Short answer, no. Look, who the speaker is will be up to the members of the Assembly, right?
You still have confidence in him and dealing with him?
Yes.
Governor, we did a story about a carve-out that was done for about 2 apartments, residents in Chelsea in a 2010 loft overhaul law. Some were saying that it's just indicative of how the Assembly has been doing business for 2 decades, backroom deals, et cetera. Isn't that the very culture you wanted to change here?
The point of your story was what, Zach? I missed it.
That basically the Assembly cut a deal where they wound up passing legislation at the state level that only affected 2 residents in Chelsea.
Yeah, again, I don't know the facts of the story, and I don't know the facts of the situation. So it's hard for me to comment on what the Assembly did because I don't know.
Governor, could you put into perspective, given the Vito Lopez case, how do you feel the behavior in Albany? Is it getting better? Is it worse than over the last few decades?
Mike, it is inarguably better. You know, government is functioning. Government is functioning better than it has functioned in decades. Why? Look at the discussion we just had about the Tappan Zee Bridge. Look at the progress that has been made with the Tappan Zee Bridge. Look at the number of pieces of legislation that we passed. Look at the budgets that we passed. Look at the difficult decisions that we made, pension reform, staffing decisions, financial decisions. The government is working much better. If you want to say, well, we have found a situation where we believe someone did something wrong, you will always find situations where people do things wrong. You'll always find situations where people in power make mistakes or abuse their power or abuse their authority or are corrupt or are venial, right? How many instances do you hear about the U.S. Congress and a congressman doing something that caused them to resign? Those situations are going to happen. If you say, well, success is when people stop doing bad things. We will never achieve success if that is your standard of success. Not in government, not in corporate America, not in your household. The question becomes, when people make a mistake or when a bad thing is done, what is the response? And what is the systemic response? And do you have a mechanism in the system to catch it, to find it, to correct it? That's the question. So on Mr. Lopez, there will be, I'm sad to say, additional acts in the future where people are accused of sexual harassment. I believe that. Well, we'll only be successful when all accusations of bad behavior stop. No. Do we have the right systems in place to catch it and to deal with it intelligently? And that's what we are in the midst of with the J. Cope investigation and review. And I think the editorials that say, because, and by the way, even that is an improvement. Because if we didn't have J. Cope, right now we would be nowhere, right? If this were last year, Mike, there's no J. Cope. This would have been all up to the legislature and the Assembly to figure it out. And then we would be saying, well, how can the Assembly deal with an issue that deals with the Speaker of the Assembly and a powerful Democratic Assembly person? How can the Assembly police its own house? We're much better off than we were with J. Cope actually being in place. So even that's an improvement.
So a more reasonable measure rather than perfect and no problems, do you still think that by a measure that Is it better or worse that it's better?
It is better in terms of functioning, better in terms of competence, better in terms of systems in place to catch mistakes and bad things that happen, better in terms of having systems in place to penalize those actions. So yes, I think it's inarguable. And to the extent you want to say, well, a bad thing happened, that means Albany isn't, quote unquote, cleaned up yet or isn't perfect yet. That is a false test.
There have been criticism of Jacob and possible leaks, and there's been calls for investigations. And there are those who say the IG, who is responsible under the law, shouldn't be doing it because it ties too many of the people in Jacob. What's your feeling on that?
Well, Ken, first of all, Jacob, as I just said, I believe it's inarguable, but that we are better off having Jacob than not having Jacob, because otherwise just imagine the conversation without Jacob, okay? Imagine the discussion of the assembly now dealing with this themselves. So Jacob is a dramatic improvement where you have a joint executive and legislative body that has people from the outside who are actually dealing with a legislative matter, okay? Well, maybe Jacob's not perfect. I am sure Jacob is not perfect, you know?
Should the IG be the one looking into any potential leaks?
I don't think there are any investigations into potential leaks that I know about, and then so theoretically, you know, could there be someone better than the IG? Look, I'm sure you could always go through theoretical exercises of how you could make it better. I think Jacob, which is new and is novel, let it operate. Let's see how it works. Do I believe we'll come up with tweaks that can be improvements? Of course I do. Of course I do. Only journalism is perfect. Everything else we can still tweak a little bit.
After a meeting last week, Jacob...
Only journalism is the Daily News, actually. So
After a meeting last week, the Jacob commissioners spent over an hour as they were about to vote to go into executive session, discussing whether they should go into executive session and what, if anything, they should allow reporters to observe, because several of the commissioners complained rather bitterly, in my opinion, that there had been leaks from their meeting a week previous to that, and the leaks were all incorrect. Eventually, they decided basically to keep the status quo and basically allow the public to see nothing. Should there be more openness on that? Because as it is structured now, many people believe that basically you just have to trust that the commissioners will do their job, because you're not going to be able to monitor what they're actually doing.
here is the yin and the yang, right? We often take the pendulum approach to policy making, that we react to the stimulus at the time. The discussion when we were creating JCOPE, the discussion at that time focused around making sure this wasn't a politicized body and it wasn't used to investigate elected officials for political purposes. And it wasn't used as a publicity machine to generate bad stories on political opponents. The answer to that was confidentiality of the subjects in the investigation. That's where the confidentiality came from. You're right, it shouldn't be used for politics. We'll keep it confidential, and you can't leak what happens at the meeting. So if there was a discussion of maybe we'll investigate Senator Smith, what did you hear about Senator Smith? What did you read? What did the witness say about Senator Smith? What did the other witness say about Senator Smith? What did Senator Smith's wife say? That conversation should not become public. Especially, I'm sorry? No, that was like John Smith. Is there a John Smith?
No.
No, good. That was John, definitely John. So that was the fear at the time, that you could just have a discussion among lay people right? They're just appointed to some board, and they would have this information, and then you could wind up having information that was negative, and there was no finding, there was no fact, etc. So when we first made J-COPE, that was the concern, so we came up with confidentiality provisions. We now look at it from the exact opposite way. Well, if there's confidentiality provisions, then we don't know what happened in the meeting. Yes, because we were afraid if the meeting was open or if you could leak, then you would hear all this preliminary information that may go absolutely nowhere. Absolutely nowhere, just theories. You know, you have letters of that board can get a letter of complaint from anyone. And they could be discussing a letter of complaint from anyone with all types of accusations made by a source that they don't even know with a rationale that they haven't even discovered, right? So you could see the potential for damaging information, but this now looks at it from the exact opposite side. Well, then you don't know who voted. I understood what they were saying last week or the week before, whenever it was, that they actually wanted people to know how they voted because there had been a story written suggesting that they were not taking a certain course and they thought that was wrong and they wanted to correct the record, which they did because they came out and they announced that it was a unanimous vote. That was their way of saying we all voted for it, so now you know each individual's vote. But I understand both perspectives. I understand the need to protect both. What is the balance? That is something that I think we could talk about and that we could explore. But there was a reason why it was designed the way it was. And when I say the pendulum approach, you know, we tend to go in 180-degree shifts. Okay, then we'll go all the other way. Everything is open. And everything is disclosed. And then we'll find out that we abused someone, and then we'll go the other way. So what's the intelligent balance? That's something that I think we will explore. But look, this is the first, as I said before, J-COPE is new. It's never been done before. It is much, much better than anything in the past. It's functioning. Let's let it function. Let's see how the machine works the first time you turn the key and all these gears start to mesh. And if we can make it better, then we'll make it better.
Governor, there were leaks from one of the J-COPE meetings. Do you think that the leaks should be investigated? You just talked about the need for confidentiality.
I don't know. Why do you say we're clearly leaks?
There were media outlets reporting, more than one outlet reporting what was discussed.
How do you know how the media outlet got it?
Well, the commissioners, I don't want to go back and forth with you, but some of the commissioners at the meeting said that there were leaks as well.
Yeah, but how do you know how the media outlet got it?
Well, it's circumstantial evidence, I guess, Governor, but there were, information came out of the meeting, and it does seem...
How?
Should someone investigate that, how they got it?
Yeah, well, you know, they would investigate a leak, but I don't even know that you know that it was a leak, you know. So, but that's not a determination for me to make.
Governor, how long do you think... I suggested maybe you haven't always been a big fan of ours in the past, but it sounds like you're...
You I've always liked, Mike. You and I have liked this.
Very close, very close.
Love it, not so much, but you and I...
Does it seem like you're making the argument not to investigate a leak? I mean, I'm not...
No, I said it's not my determination. No. What I was saying is two things. First, Yancey said there was a leak. He just made it as a statement of fact. My point was, you don't know that it's a statement of fact. There may not have been a leak. Looks like there was a leak, but there may not have been a leak. But that was just a comment on the question. The answer is, it's not my determination whether or not, or my responsibility or my place to say whether or not there should be an investigation on a potential leak.
How do you respond? There was a story, or two stories today actually in the papers regarding, you know, that said you've been critical of the way the Lopez stuff was handled, but you yourself had approved, or the office approved a confidential settlement while you were AG.
I was not critical, Ken. I said on the Jacob matter, there was a story in the newspaper. I actually said the opposite. I said, I have no reason to believe this is true, paraphrasing. There is a report. I have no reason to believe it is true. These are only rumors. However, if it were true, then there would be an alternative course, which is the Moreland Commission. But I never said that I believed it was true. The inference of what I was saying was clearly that I didn't believe the information was true.
I'm asking more about the Lopez situation in itself. The confidentiality agreement has been a big issue. There was reports today in the Times and Newsday that your office signed off on a confidentiality agreement on another case, not sexual harassment, while you were AG.
No, first, the state has signed off. The state will have, I believe, numerous agreements with confidentiality agreements in them, confidentiality provisions. Confidentiality provisions are very common, especially in this area of law. Racial discrimination complaints, workplace complaints, they're very common. They're most often requested by the plaintiffs, interestingly enough. So they're common in the whole area of law. They're common between private parties. I'm sure many of your companies, public companies, all have confidentiality agreements. And they're also in state agreements. Again, most often requested by the plaintiff. Interestingly, though, however, on the executive side, the FOIL law supersedes the confidentiality law. So, in my opinion, I don't understand what a confidentiality provision could ever get you in a state executive agreement because FOIL supersedes it. So it's going to be revealed anyway. The case they talked about, they got from FOIL. So you FOILed the case and you got the information. So what is the point of a confidentiality provision if you still have FOIL? That was my point.
Should the public have a way of knowing how many
I'm
of
sorry.
these agreements are?
I'm sorry. You,
Sorry, but I'm not just me yet.
you have, let me give you a hint in this room. This is a very aggressive group. You can't, just because they cut you off a little bit, you have to just keep going or you will never get a question asked.
Manners are not encouraged.
No, there are no manners in this room.
Governor, I was wondering what you think is an acceptable time limit for Jacob to complete its investigation.
Whatever they need. That's up to them. It's not my determination.
Governor, inasmuch as there are confidentiality agreements, do you feel as though, I mean, in this case with Vito Lopez, it seems like the confidentiality agreement may have let someone who people call a predator go back into a state office and harass more women. Should there be confidentiality agreements at all? You said there are many when it comes to sexual harassment.
Well, there are many confidentiality provisions that protect the plaintiff. You know, you could have a situation where a young woman is sexually assaulted. And the young woman says, I don't want my name in the agreement. I don't want to be publicized. I want privacy. I want to move on. This is terrible, and I don't want to have to be reading about it for the rest of my life. So, you know, that's why you often have confidentiality agreements. It will determine, but to me, it's the facts and the circumstances. And what happened with the Vito Lopez situation is a totally different situation factually and circumstantially.
Should the public know how many of these agreements are completed each year by the state and how much? I mean, shouldn't there be like a listing somewhere?
On the executive, you can FOIL all of it today.
Can you discuss the progress of LIPA reforms, and do you support legislation for repowering power plants?
Do you want to talk about LIPA?
We have been working, I think as you know, LIPA entered into a new contract that takes effect in January 2014. The original National Grid contract has expired. The new contract is with PSE&G. That gives us an opportunity to rethink the relationship between LIPA and its contractors. When LIPA was originally created, it was basically a holding company and a customer service operation, something that's grown beyond that. So we have a team of people right now looking at that, using the opportunity of the new contract to propose some restructurings, and that work's continuing.
What about the legislation on empowering local power plants?
I'm not familiar with it. I haven't seen that.
Okay, guys, thank you very much, and congratulations to the team here today.